If you do a bit of study of ancient history, in particular of the way people lived and thought in ancient times, one of the things that stands out that has struck me very strongly is that virtually all, not all, but virtually all of the ancient societies and peoples worshipped the sun and the moon as their two chief deities. And there was a reason for that. These people back then were not stupid. They understood that there was something divine about the sun and the moon. And the reason for that, very simply stated, is the sun and the moon were created. They did not evolve over billions of years of time. They were created as symbols of divinity. The sun in the heavens is the symbol of that being known in the Bible as God the Father, or the Ancient of Days in the book of Daniel. The moon, on the other hand, is the symbol of that being known as the angel of the Lord, as Michael, as Jesus the Messiah in the New Testament, who had an existence before he came to planet Earth, that he was reincarnated onto planet Earth. Now, Jesus had two natures. He had a nature as the Son of God, which was hidden when he was on earth. It was not manifest. His human nature was manifest. His divine nature was hidden. But because it was hidden does not mean that it was not there in full force. It was. Now the moon, as we have, as I discussed in a previous video, and I will just repeat it here briefly, the moon is both a satellite of Earth and a planet of the sun. But first and foremost, because it owes primary gravitational allegiance to the sun, the moon is a planet, rather more than it is a satellite. And the moon is the only object in the solar system that has this dual nature. The satellites of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune have just one nature. They're satellites. That's all they are. They are not planet and satellite. But the moon is both. It is both a planet and a satellite. And so the moon is the very appropriate symbol of the Son of God in the heavens because it has two natures. It has a higher nature, a true planet of the sun, and a lower nature, a satellite of Earth. And all the ancient peoples understood this originally. As the human race fell further and further into rebellion against God and into moral decrepitude, it was forgotten that the sun and the moon were merely symbols of divinity, and the ancient humans began to worship the sun and the moon as though they were divine objects or entities in and of themselves, which they were not. The sun and the moon, originally, there was an eclipse of the sun, only annular eclipses. There were no total eclipses originally. They were all annular. The annular eclipses occurred every 30 days, and the eclipse path was straight along the equator, which is the very best place, according to the astronomers, and I agree with them, to have an eclipse because they last longer at the equator. Well, an eclipse is a total solar eclipse, or an annular eclipse is a most remarkable phenomenon of nature. I had a chance to see one back in 1979, February. Unfortunately, where I was, in the eclipse zone, the sky was completely clouded over, socked in, couldn't see a trace of the eclipse. This eclipse that is crossing the country here in another 30 days is a most remarkable eclipse. Now, we did have an eclipse rather like it back in June of 1918, when again the eclipse path went from the west to the east, clear across the country. And but back in 1918, the transportation network was not as extensive as it is now. People did not have cars like we have now. You did not have either radio or television. You didn't have all the magazines and the media back then that we have now. So some people didn't know about the eclipse until it occurred. My grandmother, my father's mother, then 22 years old, out for a walk on a bright Saturday morning with my father, a bit past 3 years of age, and his younger brother, about a year and a half old at that point. She was completely blindsided by the eclipse. She did not know it was going to happen, probably did not even know what an eclipse was, and she noticed at some point the sky was getting dark, looked up to the sun, and to her consternation discovered the sun was going black in the sky. Well, this is a very impressive event to live through for anybody, whether in ancient times or at the present time. But this eclipse crossing the country from one side of this country to the other stands out above and beyond all previous eclipses for this simple reason. It is occurring in the most powerful nation on the face of the planet. Roughly 70%, no, closer to 85%, of the people of this country identify themselves as Christians. That does not mean they behave as Christians, nor does that mean that they go to church on a regular basis or read the Bible on a regular basis, but they do claim to be Christians. If they were tried in a court of law based on the evidence at hand, they might not be convicted of being Christians, but they claim to be Christians nonetheless. So I will just leave it at that. But what I want to say here is that it should be of some considerable interest to this country with its Christian roots. 85% of the people claiming to be Christians, 85% of Congress claiming to be Christians. You would assume that with all those Christians in Congress, you would have a little more bipartisanship, but apparently that's not part of Christianity as it's practiced in the halls of Congress. But it should be of interest to the people of this country that the sun in the heavens is the symbol of God the Father, and the moon is the symbol of the Son of God. The moon is the only object, again, that has two natures. It is a higher nature, a planet of the sun, a lower nature, a satellite of Earth, and so the Son of God, when he was on Earth, his divine nature was disguised. From here on planet Earth, the moon looks very much like a satellite of Earth. If you could get off of our viewing platform and stand, say, on Mars and view what's going on, you would regard the moon as a true planet of the sun. It would be very obvious from Mars or Venus, if you could stand the heat, or any other place in the solar system, that we are part of a double planetary system. Now, why do we have this great eclipse of the sun, and why do we have it now? This eclipse, beyond any question, is going to be the eclipse witnessed by the greatest number of people in American history. It fortunately is happening on a Monday rather than on a Sunday. If it happened on a Sunday, it would be total pandemonium from millions and millions of more people getting down into the eclipse zone. As is, along the eclipse path, there are millions of people who live along that eclipse path. There are tens and tens of millions of people that live within 200 miles either north or south of the eclipse path. And they will think nothing of driving that short distance to witness a once in a lifetime, truly spectacular astronomical event. But this eclipse, beyond being witnessed by many Americans, is, in my judgment, going to be the eclipse witnessed by the greatest number of people in human history. Because eclipses in the past, it was not always known that there was going to be an eclipse. Now, the astronomers have known as far back as ancient Babylon how to predict eclipses, but they didn't always have the news media to get the word out, and they didn't always have the transportation to get into the eclipse zone. But in this case, we have. And so this eclipse is probably, to my mind, certainly will be the most witnessed eclipse in all of human history. Now, why is that significant? Well, if you look at the situation of the world today, and there are quite a few madmen that seem to be in positions of high power. I am not making any comments or criticisms as to the government of the United States. I am thinking more about people that like to kill and maim and do things in the name of their religion that simply results in a lot of unnecessary death and suffering. But one wonders, as we look at the current state of affairs, just how long the lid can be kept on the global can of worms that we're living with. And in my opinion, it will not be kept on that can of worms that much longer. In my opinion, we are only a few years removed from the second coming of Christ. Now that should not mean, but to many people it does, that he's going to set up a kingdom in Jerusalem and rule the world in peace for 1,000 years. That is not what the Bible teaches. He is going to return to a planet that has been devastated, utterly devastated by nuclear warfare. Fukushima is going to look like a haven of tranquility and paradise compared to the nuclear contamination that will characterize the entire planet at that point. And so we need to be aware of the times in which we live. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Three Great Signs, subtitle Countdown to the Soon Return of Christ, in which I laid out the evidence from history and scripture very thoroughly. Now this third book that we are working on here, the Eclipse Revelation, I might mention that in the series of 3 books, these are 8.5 by 11-inch format books, they're large format, that in the 3 books there are 90 pages of quotations from published astronomy books to back up all the things that I have said on these 3 videos. If you think I don't know what I'm talking about, read the books. You will find out that I know exactly what I'm talking about. The theologians can't tell you. They don't understand astronomy. They don't understand the texts in the Bible that are astronomical in nature. The astronomers don't read the Bible, probably generally, and if they do, they dismiss much of it as myth or legend. I, however, read astronomy books. I've been through more than 3,000 of them. I also read the Bible, and I'm able to connect the dots and show what is really going on. So I hope that these 3 videos have shed a small amount of light on your path, and I hope that you will go to the, that you will email me if you are interested in some further information on these books. I will be happy to send you further information. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to be there for the eclipse. This is something you do not wish to miss. Take the day off, get your wife, get your kids, get your dog, your cat, well, they don't care, and go see the eclipse. Don't let this wonderful opportunity pass you by.